What's up, everyone? Welcome to Bill Bronze and Dragons. I'm your host, Bill Braun Battlestone. So today we're having another episode of my character build series. Today looking at the Infiltrator Armorer. So this is the second half of our look at the Armorer. Last time out we did the Guardian, and this time the Infiltrator. And man, this is a really good build. I'm pleasantly surprised and quite impressed at how great it is on the combat side of things, and how it really brings it on the utility side of things as well. So we're going to go over all of that. And I wanted to first talk a little bit in general about my character sheets. I am really pleased with how far they have come. I've been trying to make them more and more sophisticated with each video. When I look back at my first ones, I mean, like the first build I did, I had to take down. It was so bad. And the next one I did, which is the first one that you see on my channel, is the Order of Scribes build that I did, and when I look back at that, I'm like, oh my god, the presentation and formatting is so bad. And I have tried to make it better, and I've been, starting to include, standard or base DPR baseline and elite DPR baselines, and doing tons of calculations. And I really want to shout out to my Patreon community on the Discord, because now that these guys are in my corner, I mean, these builds I think are the best out there, right? I mean, we provide everything. The DPR calculations so that you can compare it to baselines, to two different baselines, and we lay out meticulously every single thing that you can do, every advocated spell progression. We call out all of the tactics that can be applied to these things, no matter how cheesy. And, I do my best to try and qualify them and say what's rules is written and what your DM needs to call out for. And that's not easy, because I'll tell you, before I got these guys, I would have a process where I would research. And my research involves going through every single thing I can find until I go about a half hour to 45 minutes without finding anything new. And then on top of that, I then start brainstorming myself and start adding all sorts of other stuff that I can think of, which is actually usually quite a bit more than I can find out there. And even so, they weren't perfect. I would still miss stuff because I'm just one man and, trying to take advantage of that research community out there. But now I've got some real stars in my Discord that no matter what I can find in research and no matter what I can come up with myself, these guys just keep adding more. And now I'm bringing all of that to you as a gestalt in these character sheets that I just think are super duper fantastic. That said, if you can think of any ways that I can make these better, please let me know. I want these to be perfect, right? This is an optimization project, just like a build, except it's on my channel. And, let me know. This is all for you guys. Your feedback is super appreciated and important. All right, that went on a little bit longer than I thought it would. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, check out the Patreon if you want to support the channel. Without further ado, let's check out the Infiltrator Armorer. Alrighty, I have put the setup on the screen and you can see what we're doing here. So, Bill Braun Infiltrator Armorer is going to be a custom race, starting with stats of Strength 8, Dex 14, Con 14, Intelligence 18, Wisdom 12, and Charisma 8. We start with Dark Vision, and as always, I'll be comparing our damage to a standard DPR baseline of Agonizing Blast plus Hex hitting 60% of the time, and an elite DPR baseline of a fighter with Fighting Style Archery, Crossbow Expert, and Sharpshooter hitting 70% of the time. Finally, as a reminder, I present the DPR figures in modular form so that you know what you are doing round to round based on the choices that you make. And if you want to know what you are doing over what you consider to be an average battle, you're going to have to do a little bit more math, but I've at least provided you the figures so that you can do that. So this build optimizes the Infiltrator armor. It is impossible to create a build that can use both armor versions interchangeably because they require different feat progressions to optimize each. The playstyle of this build is as a stealthy spy type, taking our inspiration from the very name Infiltrator, capable of penetrating strongholds and gathering intel, and the combat playstyle is as a ranged martial. And as a ranged martial, this build is awesome. It offers fantastic DPR, on par with the elite DPR baseline at nearly every level except level 1. We are only slightly lower than the baseline at levels 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We are greatly higher than the baseline at levels 3, 9, and 10. And we are on par or slightly higher than the elite DPR baseline at levels 11 through 19. And it's only at level 20 that they catch and pass us. So the bottom line is that this build offers higher DPR than the elite DPR baseline over most of our career. That is impressive, especially considering that it also brings it as an infiltrator and also provides the party heals, utility, and support. Final note on the setup, I don't usually deal too much with skills and let you choose that, but on this build there are 3 necessary skills. You want stealth, perception, and investigation. So at level 1, we are Artificers, and we do not dip in this build, so it's level 1 through 20 Artificers. We are starting with Shadow Touched as our feat, and we get Magical Tinkering, 2 cantrips, 4 spell preps, and 3/1 slots. Our cantrips will be Guidance and Magic Stone, Guidance being self-explanatory, and Magic Stone will be our main attack. Now we're going to carry a sling that will give us extra range if we need it, but be aware that we are going to have to drop our shield to use it because it has the ammunition property. So be wary and use it with discretion. You might consider giving your extras to party members with bad ranged attacks, because ours is pretty elite at level 1. And while this should probably only be a level 1 tactic, because we're going to get a homunculus next level, and they're going to be throwing one for us sometimes, but level 1 does count, and even after level 1, it might sometimes be optimal. So just keep in mind, you can give these stones to other people. For our spell preps, we are taking Invisibility and Silent Image from Shadow Touched, and from our class, we are taking Expeditious Retreat, Absorb Elements, Cure Wounds, and Disguise Self. So Invisibility and Silent Image came with Shadow Touched. I like Invisibility here because our Infiltrator playstyle is all about being super sneaky. So this has synergy with the stealth proficiency that we're starting with, and our Infiltrator armor at level 3, which will give us advantage on those stealth checks. And I want to point out there's also synergy with a crowbar, which our Artificer gets as part of its starting Dungeoneers pack, because attacking an object will break invisibility. You can't make attacks. But a skill check with a crowbar won't. So you can break open doors and latches and locks and stuff with your crowbar and not break your invisibility. Something to keep in mind as an infiltrator. And while invisibility is nice, Silent Image is the main add here. Silent Image is going to be our main combat tactic and primary concentration option going forward to level 20. So really, really big add here for us. We are going to be using this to create perfect obscurement from which we can launch our ranged attacks. That means our attacks are at advantage and we are attacked at disadvantage until the illusion is revealed. That requires them to either interact with the illusion or to use an action to perform a successful investigation check against your save DC. Those things are not going to happen too often if you are wise about where you place the illusion. Now, because it's Silent Image and not Minor Illusion, you can create atmospheric effects, so darkness, smoke, fog, all of that, which will not trigger an investigation check when arrows or magic stones start flying out of it. Now, you do have to make sure that you create your defensive embankment at a point where enemies can't interact with it. Obviously, don't use it if your enemies can easily interact with it. That would be stupid, and as optimizers, we try not to be stupid. You want to place it behind your lines, up on that cliff, up on that tree, behind that chasm, right? Use the environment, pick a spot where they're not going to be able to interact with you, and then put the illusion down for your perfect obscurement. And plus, we only get this 3 times a day right now anyway, and it's going to be 5 times a day max eventually, so we're probably not going to use it in every single combat. Be opportunistic. Only use a tactic when the situation calls for it. The Silent Image is going to have synergy when we get Winged Boots at level 10, because then we're going to be able to place the image way up in the sky, and that means 70% of enemies are not going to be able to interact with it. Not to mention, we are infiltrators, and a Silent Image can be very tricksy. You can distract people, you can foil pursuit by creating the image of walls and stuff behind you. I mean, all sorts of stuff you can do with it if you use your imagination. And it's a particularly awesome ad for this build because Silent Image is not normally available to the Artificer, and it works so well with our playstyle. I really love Shadow Touched here. See my deep dive series video on Major Image for more information on combat illusions. A lot of it does pertain to Silent Image. We also add Expeditious Retreat for a mobility bump and to enable or defend against kiting. It's one of my no-brainers that I always add to every build that has it. Absorb Elements is self-explanatory, Cure Wounds is self-explanatory, and Disguise Self is for utility and synergy with the fact that we're infiltrators. If we're going to penetrate that stronghold, Disguise Self could come in handy in lots of different cases. I also want to point out that this build comes with Magical Tinkering, and Magical Tinkering is pretty cool for a quote-unquote ribbon. See my deep dive series video on Magical Tinkering for more info. It's pretty sweet. Our armor is going to be Scale Mail plus Dex plus Shield for a solid 18 at level 1. And our round 1 and 2 are going to be either Silent Image or Attack, plus our bonus action Magic Stone, and then round 2 Attack. We might not need to use Magic Stone in round 1 because your DM might allow you to just cast it every minute as you're adventuring, and then the stones will be ready to go on round 1. You don't have to cast it. At level 2, our infusions come online. To our preps, we add Detect Magic. Detect Magic as a ritual just to ease the pressure on our spell slots. We don't have that many, and we've already got a ton of spells that call for them. So this is going to give us something useful without occupying any slots. And we add infusions. So our infusions known will be Enhanced Defense, Enhanced Weapon, Spell Rot Tattoo, and Homunculus. And our infusions active will be Enhanced Defense and Homunculus. The Homunculus is a big add for us. Remember that all of our key tactics are in blue. It's going to give us a DPR bump and added utility. The DPR bump is sneaky good, and the utility is quite nice because these things are sneaky smart with an intelligence of 10. So they're going to be smarter than a lot of your party members, and they are very capable of complex tasks. You can also deliver touch spells with them, so things like Guidance, Cure Wounds, Invisibility or Greater Invisibility, Lesser or Greater Restoration, Fly, Revivify, all of those are good options for that. And we will add a familiar with the Spell Rot Tattoo. This is possible rules as written, but check with the DM. It's possibly a Wizards of the Coast oversight, and your DM might think it's overpowered, in which case you can take a different infusion. Here we're going to assume that we can do it, and so we'll take an Owl for the Flyby Help action. That's going to reliably impart advantage to a single attack. And it's also good at delivering touch spells as per the Homunculus. It's also good for defense and utility. See my deep dive series video on Advanced Familiar Tactics for info on that. And if we can afford it, we're going to bump our armor up to half plate, plus Dex, plus Shield, and add Enhanced Defense, and bring our armor class up to 20, which is just great for level 2. And now our round 1 and 2 is going to include the bonus action Homunculus attack. Try and have your magic stones ready to go in round 1 by casting it every minute so that you can use your bonus action to attack with the Homunculus in round 1. And in fact, if you do that, you can use the Homunculus to attack with a magic stone. And that's going to give you 2 rounds of magic stone attacks plus Homunculus attack before you have to cast magic stone again with a bonus action on round 3. At level 3, we officially become Armorers, and Arcane Armor is online. To our spell preps, we add Magic Missile and Thunder Wave, both of which come with the subclass. I don't see casting Magic Missile very often, but it does have some occasional value. And we might cast Thunder Wave sometimes if we can get tons of creatures in the AoE. But generally I don't like blasts on a half caster because they're typically pretty low return on investment anyway. And once you throw in half of the slots, that's just not enough for blasting, in my opinion. More importantly, the Arcane Armor Infiltrator is online for the Lightning Launcher, plus 5-foot move, and stealth advantage. Although do note that we can gain the temporary hit points of the Guardian Armor's defensive field if we use the short rest trick. The short rest trick, as opposed to the long rest trick, is starting with the Guardian after your long rest, then activating its defensive field to confer temporary hit points, which don't expire until the end of the day, and then using a short rest immediately after the long rest to switch your armor to the Infiltrator. That's going to extend the duration of your long rest from 8 hours to 9 hours, but it's going to get you a few temporary hit points, so if your DM allows it, totally do it. More importantly, the Lightning Launcher is now our main attack, and while this is pretty good in terms of the numbers, lightning damage is lame. it is much inferior to thunder from the thunder gauntlets or magical piercing from a weapon. About 7% of all creatures are lightning resistant, and about 4% of all creatures are lightning immune. So this is going to be a problem. There are some things that you are not going to want to attack with a lightning launcher, like Slotty, the lightning dragons, demons, Yugalas, storm giants, incorporeal undead. I mean, there's going to be plenty of battles where lightning launcher is going to really hurt you. So we must have a backup tactic available when we are facing lightning resistance or immunity. And ours will be Magic Stone. It's not ideal because that is a lower DPR for us, and it causes bonus action clog with our homunculus, but there's just not much else we can do without a significant amount of investment, and we're going to need it about 10% of the time, so we're just going to have to live with it. We will use a sling so that we can use our sharpshooter power attack with it, and it will also synergize with our extra attack and haste. I put some supporting tweets and receipts on the screen to back this up. But do note that the sling has the ammunition property, so we've got to drop our shield to use it. And it might be a magic shield, so we could be losing 2, 3, or 4 points of AC, so it is a bit of a sacrifice. But that said, we are ranged attackers, so if we can control the range, we can possibly minimize our exposure to attack. And that could be through silent image or using the environment or whatever. Or we could just keep our defenses up and eat a lower DPR and not use sharpshooter with our magic stones, but that's all very situation dependent. Also note that the lightning launcher is now on our chest, which gives us a free hand even with a shield. And I have to say it was pretty tough to try and figure out a way to leverage this without magic items, but I do want to point out that it is useful with some magic items, like a decanter of endless water in your offhand can be really cool, and there are some other cool items, so keep your eyes open and be opportunistic about that. And if you don't want to take magic items into account, honestly, the only thing that we could come up with was that you could possibly hold a finesse weapon in your hand, and that way you could take defensive duelist, which we could stick into the build at levels 12 or 16. I also thought that if you have Essence of Ether, that's a really nice thing to hold in your offhand, and then you could use it without having to fumble around or whatever. See my Showdown series video on poisons for more info about how great Essence of Ether is. But just be aware, you have an offhand, and so you might be able to use that to grapple or something. I mean, it's pretty niche, but it might come in handy. So to our infusions active, we are going to add enhanced weapon on the lightning launcher and drop enhanced defense. Our combat armor will now be plate mail plus shield, presuming that you can afford it, if not, obviously split mail. And I'm only reflecting the combat armor AC in the AC column. But note with our combat armor, our stealth checks are at normal. That's better than disadvantage, which normally is conferred by the heavy armor, but you might want better than that. So also carry around a breastplate that you can use when you are taking your infiltrator roll. That will gain us advantage on stealth checks instead of just normal as with plate mail. The downside is that it sacrifices -2 from our AC, but that can be a trade-off that you might want to take based on the scenario. Note that it can be logistically annoying to carry around 2 sets of armor since we've only got strength 8. Both of them combined are 85 pounds, and our carrying capacity is 120, so that's pretty tight. But we can manage that with a mount, with a bag of holding, with Tensor's floating disc, with help from an ally. Whatever it takes, it's worth it to have both sets of armor available, and no change to our rounds 1 and 2. At level 4, we add our first feat, which will be Sharpshooter. To our spell preps, we add Featherfall for utility, but also as a placeholder because we're going to drop it at the next level. More importantly, Sharpshooter is online to bump our DPR. It's going to have strong synergy with our silent image go-to tactic because remember, we'll be at perfect obscurement and be attacking at advantage, so we'll be able to pump out Sharpshooter pretty much all the time. Note that the equation for determining when you should use your power attack are either when you have advantage or when the target AC is less than 16 plus your attack bonus minus half of your average damage without power attack on one hit. See my deep dive series video on Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter for more info about how all that works. And do note that our DPR dipped here as the target AC bumped and our attack bonus didn't. And while Sharpshooter made it up for us, it didn't affect our homunculus, so that's why the numbers dipped. No change to our rounds 1 and 2. At level 5, we enter a new tier, so I've added a list of where our cantrips, spell preps, infusions known, and infusions active are at. And level 5 is a big level for us. Extra attack is online, we get 2nd level spells, and we double our slots. So to our preps, we add Mirror Image, Shatter, Levitate, and Blur, dropping Detect Magic and Featherfall. Mirror Image and Shatter came with a subclass, and Mirror Image is a solid add. It's inferior to Blur unless we need concentration, which we mostly don't, but it can be nice once we move up to Haste. Then we can run both Haste and Mirror Image, or Blur and Mirror Image for that matter, if we are pre-buffing. It's honestly not worth a combat action, especially if you're casting Haste in round 1, but if you are initiating the attack and can pre-buff, that can be a good combo. And Shatter is just a blast that we don't have slots for, so I'll never cast that. The big add here is Levitate. Remember, we are ranged attackers, so Levitate will give us auto wins versus non-flying enemies with no or poor ranged attacks. And Pack Tactics just did a video on this where he had a friend go through the monster manual and all of the monsters and meticulously hand pick out which ones are auto wins when you have flying or levitate, and it's 70% of all enemies, so huge advantage. That means it's our first option for concentration. It's our go-to tactic if it's one of those 70% of enemies that are pretty much helpless against an opponent that's up in the air. If it's the 30% that can deal with a creature up in the air, then we're going to go with Silent Image. Levitate is also a solid Saber Suck option. It's got great utility and mobility for our Infiltrator role, so a really nice add for us. See my Deep Dive series video on Levitate for more info about all of that. And Blur is an elite defensive option. It does have great synergy with our fantastic AC, but it is a backup option for us. Silent Image is still preferred, and Levitate is preferred. Those just give us more advantages than Blur. This is more of our backup against enemies that threaten to interact with our image or get in our faces, for example, in a constrained environment versus mobile enemies. Then it's going to come in really, really handy. Also, Extra Attack is now online, and that's going to give us a pretty awesome DPR bump. It's always awesome to get Extra Attack. Our round 1 and 2 change up a little bit. We've added the options for Levitate and Blur, but otherwise no change. At level 6, we add Tool Expertise and an Infusions bump. To our spell preps, we add Lesser Restoration for healing the appropriate conditions. And to our Infusions known, we add Repulsion Shield and Radiant Weapon. And our Infusions active will be Repulsion Shield, Radiant Weapon, and Homunculus. So the Repulsion Shield is actually really excellent on a ranged martial because you're generally going to be controlling the range. And if enemies close with you, that will mean they'll generally have had to move first. So that push reaction might be really nice at keeping them from closing again. They might not have enough move. And do note that Radiant Weapon creates a light that is not affected by Magical Darkness spells. Also note that the tool expertise that we get does apply to our Thieves' Tools for our Infiltrator role, so we're pretty good on popping locks and such. No change to our rounds 1 and 2. At level 7, Flash of Genius comes online to bump our initiative, bump our saves, our stealth checks, our Thieves' Tool checks, our Dispel Magic checks. It's pretty awesome. Do note that it can't apply to your initiative if you're surprised, and do note that you can stack it with guidance on your stealth rolls, on your Thieves' Tool rolls, all of that. Otherwise, no change to our round 1 and 2. At level 8, we add See Invisible and Web. See Invisible for the utility, but also as a placeholder because we're going to drop that at next level. And Web as an elite control option that can also take down flying enemies that lack hover. We get an ASI, which will be Intelligence +2, and that's going to max out our combat and casting stat. No change to our rounds 1 and 2. Level 9 is a huge level for us as armor modifications come online. To our preps, we add Hypnotic Pattern, Lightning Bolt, Haste, and Revivify, dropping See Invisible and Cure Wounds. So Hypnotic Pattern and Lightning Bolt came with a subclass. Hypnotic Pattern, of course, is an elite control option, one of the best spells in 5th edition. Really, really nice to add it here. And Lightning Bolt is not great. I mean, it's got nice role-playing synergy since we're lightning launchers. And maybe if the stars align and we can get like 10 enemies in the AoE, but I'm generally not a fan of Lightning Bolt. The more important add is Haste. That is going to be a strong concentration option for us going forward. Now keep in mind, because of our playstyle, Silent Image is still our first option, Levitate is still one of our first options, Haste is now our second option, Blur is now our third option. But when we use it, it's going to be awesome. It gives us that bump to AC, bump to move, which has synergy with our 35-foot move. And of course, the extra attack bumps our DPR. We also added Revivify, which is self-explanatory. Always nice to have 2 party members with access to it in case one of the casters dies. So hopefully us and the cleric are going to be a good team in that regard. And to our infusions, we are going to add the Spell Refueling Ring and drop Radiant Weapon. Radiant Weapon is going to be redundant at the next level, and for level 9, an additional 3rd level spell is fantastic. We're half casters, so an extra 3rd is really sweet. We might also opt for the Cloak of Elvenkind to help us with stealth for our Infiltrator roll, because that's going to impose perception checks at disadvantage for those that are trying to notice you. So combined with our huge stealth abilities, that would just basically make us unperceivable. So that can be a nice option, but either way, we're making this infusion inactive at the next level, so don't stress it too much. And now that Armor Modifications is online, we can finally put multiple infusions onto our armor, so we can get offense and defense both. And so at this level, our infusions active are going to be Enhanced Weapon on the Lightning Launcher, Enhanced Defense on the armor, Repulsion Shield, Homunculus, and the Spell Refueling Ring, but no change to our round 1 and 2. And level 10 is also a big level for us, because Magic Item Adept comes online and we get 10th level infusions. So we get a new cantrip. We're going to add Mending for utility and for healing our Homunculus. And to our preps, we are adding Blink and Dispel Magic, dropping Levitate. Blink is not intended for defense, but for our Infiltrator roll, because this is going to allow us to teleport past walls and obstacles. We can use the ready action to move 10 feet through the wall while we're on the ethereal plane, and that means we can see on the other side of the wall and then reappear in that spot, as per the description of the spell. Or we can send our familiar to the other side of that wall somehow, either through a little crack, or we can just teleport it over there as part of the familiar power set. And then we can use an action to see through the familiar senses, and then we can use Blink to target that location. I don't ever see casting it in combat, but it is nice as the Infiltrator. We also added Dispel Magic as a caster must-have. And to our infusions known, we add Cloak of Protection, Helm of Telepathy, and Winged Boots, dropping the Spell Refueling Ring, and we make them all active. Enhanced Weapon on the Lightning Launcher, Enhanced Defense on the chest, Helm of Telepathy on the helm, Winged Boots on the boots, the Repulsion Shield, and Cloak of Protection. Our Enhanced Weapon and Enhanced Defense each bump to +2. The Helm of Telepathy and the Winged Boots are online to make us so powerful. As far as the Helm of Telepathy, see my Deep Dive series video for more info on this game-breaking item, because it has such good synergy with our Infiltrator roll. If we infiltrate a stronghold with Helm of Telepathy, we're going to walk out of there with every single secret in every single mind in that place. It's that good. So, so good for this build. And then, of course, Winged Boots, one of the best uncommons in the game. Flight on demand with no action economy. It is just so good for any character, but especially for a ranged martial. That means we don't need Levitate anymore, and huge synergy with Silent Image, because no concentration flight means we can put the Silent Image in the air, and that means most creatures will not be able to interact with it. And we're just going to get perfect obscurement anytime we want. That is so great in combat. And it is also pretty sweet in our Infiltrator role, being able to fly, so huge power boost for us here. And then on top of that, we get Magic Item Adept. So now we get an extra attunement, we get quick and cheap magic item construction, and this is just so good. It depends on the table how good it is, but a 4th magic item attunement is going to rock. No change to our round 1 and 2, but boy, we are badass at this point. At level 11, we enter Tier 3, and Spell Storing Item is online. To our spell preps, we add Tiny Servant and Drop Web, and the Tiny Servant is going to be a useful little helper for utility and defense. I added it mostly for rest tricking. I don't really intend to use any slots for it because those are for haste. And we were able to add it and drop web because we don't need web anymore. It's going to be in our spell storing item. So see my separate deep dive series videos on Tiny Servant and rest tricking for more info about all of that. Tiny Servants are amazing. Getting them for free through rest tricking is amazing. And you might even want to cast it as a slot. We do get 3 of them, so something to think about. But more importantly, we've got our spell storing item online. We're going to give it to our familiar or a Tiny Servant to weaponize its concentration. Try and avoid giving it to our Homunculus because it can already attack for us. And we're going to load it with either Web, Disguise Self, or Invisibility, depending on our forecasted needs for combat or infiltration. Web is amazing during combat, especially if you've offloaded the concentration and the action, and Disguise Self and Invisibility 10 times a day is going to rock when we're infiltrating. So yeah, levels 9, 10, and 11 have been so good to us. At level 12, we get another ASI. To our spell preps, we're going to add Aid for defense and rest tricking, because it has an 8-hour duration and you can rest trick it. But also as a placeholder, we're going to drop it at the next level. But more importantly, Lucky is online for those sweet rerolls. It's one of the best feats in the game. I always try to add it. And it's especially good on this build because not only do we care about saves and hits and stuff, but also all of these checks that we need to make with stealth and such. Thieves' tools, all of that. So really nice to be lucky, especially combined with Flash of Genius. No change to our round 1 and 2. Oh, except that at last level we added the extra web from our familiar or tiny servant. At level 13, we get 4th level spells. So to our preps, we add Fire Shield, Greater Invisibility, and Arcane Eye, dropping Aid. Fire Shield and Greater Invisibility came with a subclass, and neither are all that great for this build, to be honest. Fire Shield is a decent, no concentration, 10-minute duration defense, but it's usually better for a melee marshal because they proc the retaliation damage on a regular basis, and we don't since we're ranged attackers. But sometimes people force the issue and they're in our face, and Fire Shield can be okay. And Greater Invisibility is another one that I think is better for a melee marshal because we can get the same benefit out of Silent Image. So yeah, if you can get the same effect out of a 1st level spell as opposed to a 4th level spell, kind of a no-brainer. So yeah, Silent Image is still our first option for action and concentration. I will say the Greater Invisibility can be useful in our Infiltrator role, however. If we need to do some actions that would normally reveal us, we can pop a Greater Invisibility and then do our thing for 1 minute before going back to regular invisibility. I also love adding Arcane Eye here. It's such a fantastic utility option. Great role-playing synergy with our Infiltrator role. Still a great spell, man. I would add it on almost any build when I can. And it is just way better than the Familiar in this role. Because you are probably going to be using your Familiar to do this sort of thing, but Arcane Eye is just so good. It's invisible, it's got unlimited range, it's immune to damage pretty much, except like Dispel Magics, and it's super small. I mean, it is just so good. But that said, it is a utility option. We're going to prep it when we need it. Most times I would probably choose to use our 4th level slot here to upcast Tiny Servant, because that's going to get us 3 of them, and 3 Tiny Servants as an 8-hour always on offloading action economy sort of thing is just awesome. Great utility, great defense, and we can deploy them in offense if we want as well, and they'll add a little bit of damage on top of what we're already doing. Which, by the way, if you haven't noticed, is pretty awesome. No change to our rounds 1 and 2. Level 14 is an awesome level for us because we get an infusions bump and magic item savant is online. 14th level infusions are amazeballs. We do add a cantrip, so we're going to add message for utility, and we're also going to add stone shape as an ultimate defense option and for utility. I think it has nice role-playing synergy for our Infiltrator role. We'll be able to open holes in walls and jam doors and access vaults and all sorts of cool stuff. See my deep dive series video on Stone Shape for more info about how great that spell is. And to our infusions known, we are adding the Amulet of Health and the Gem of Seeing, making active the Amulet of Health. That's going to give us a huge hit point and con save bump. And the Gem of Seeing is nice utility for special occasions, might be very helpful on certain Infiltrator missions. And Magic Item Savant is online. We get 5 attunements and no restrictions on items, and that's just crazy good. Again, will vary by table, but regardless of what table you're at, it's just so good. No change to our rounds 1 and 2. And at level 15, Perfected Armor comes online. To our spell preps, we add Freedom of Movement, dropping Blur, which is nice utility and nice role-playing synergy with our Infiltrator role. But more importantly, Perfected Armor is online. And whereas the Guardian had a pretty lame Perfected Armor, this one is okay. It gives a really nice defense where the person you hit attacks you at disadvantage until the start of your next turn, so all of their attacks. That is pretty sweet. I feel like we can drop Blur due to the redundancy. And do note that it will dim light them up, so it will interfere with some light-sensitive abilities. Not all that many, but if you're in darkness without dark vision, that can be nice. If you're facing a Gloomstalker, that can be nice. It should defeat the Summon Fae Trixie version, where it can create that 5-foot cube of darkness, although it's weird to think of how that interaction would work. But in any case, it's just dim light. But that said, even dim light will defeat magical darkness spells. And then on top of that, you get a little damage bump. So it's kind of hard to reflect it in the DPR due to the complexity of how it works. Just for sake of simplicity, I just added a d6 to the base damage, but it's a nice little bump. A few points, but it puts it a few percentage points above the elite DPR baseline. No change to our rounds 1 and 2. At level 16, we get another ASI. To our spell preps, we add Resilient Sphere as an ultimate defense option for ourself or an ally, and it can sometimes be a decent save or suck, but it's mostly a placeholder. We're going to drop it at next level. Our ASI is going to be tough to give us another huge hit point bump. No change to our rounds 1 and 2. At level 17, we enter Tier 4, and we get 5th level spells. To our spell preps, we add Pass Wall, Wall of Force, Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound, and Skill Empowerment, dropping Resilient Sphere and Freedom of Movement. So Pass Wall and Wall of Force came with a subclass. They are awesome for this build. Pass Wall is always a sneaky, fantastic utility spell. One of my favorites to have available on like a scroll or something. But even better role-playing synergy with our Infiltrator build. It's like what we were doing with Stone Shape, but way bigger. And we get Wall of Force, one of the best control spells in 5th edition versus a single enemy or just a couple of enemies. Artificers don't normally get it, so a really nice add for us. And we are adding Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound to combo with Wall of Force because those two together equals auto-win. We can't do it too often. We only get 1 5th level slot, so this is a once a day kind of thing, but 1 auto-win a day is awesome. I also added Skill Empowerment here just to gain expertise on stealth for our Infiltrator role. I mean, we are getting really crazy on the stealth here, guys. We've already got Advantage and Flash of Genius and Lucky, but if we are trying to infiltrate something where we know that there's excellent perceivers around, we can really boost it up with Skill Empowerment to get that expertise. Great to combo with our Infiltrator armor and like the invisibility from our spell storing item. No change to our round 1 and 2. At level 18, we get an Infusions bump and become Magic Item Masters. To our spell preps, we add Animate Objects as a great offensive option. Pumps out really good damage, as you can see. And more interesting to me is that it's something that we can deploy while remaining in Infiltrator mode, not attacking ourselves if need be. To our Infusions known, we add Ring of Protection and Dimensional Shackles. We make active the Ring of Protection. That's just going to bump all of our base underlying numbers. Our AC is now 25 and our saves are ridiculous. We add Dimensional Shackles for utility. It can be useful with Hypnotic Pattern and stuff. And we are Magic Item Masters. 6 attunements, double the normal attunements. Just so good. Yeah, baby. No change to our round 1 and 2. At level 19, we add our final ASI, so we're going to get Alert. It's one of the best feats in the game. Still has an impact even at this late level. And nice synergy for our Infiltrator role. We can't be surprised, and we're quick to act. No change to our round 1 and 2. And finally, we get to level 20 and our capstone. To our spell preps, we add Transmute Rock as one of the best controls in the game. The fact that it's no concentration is amazeballs. And Soul of Artifice is online for ridiculous saves for a quasi-death ward. Of course, we do have to max out our attunements at 6, but that's not going to be a problem at level 20. And look at those saves. Ha ha, those don't even count Flash of Genius. Lucky, just such good saves. I love this capstone. So that's it. The Infiltrator Armorer, I think it is pretty awesome, man. Not only does it have elite DPR, I mean, it just brings it on the utility side of things. This is a really good character in all phases of the game. And it does have like that lightning thing. Sometimes it is going to work against us, but I mean, come on. You can't be great at everything. And this thing is practically good at everything. So no dips. I think it's great all by itself. But let me know what you think. Can it be improved? Do you think a dip would make it better? I'm always happy to hear what my viewers have to say. And regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been Bill Bronze and Dragons. I'm your host, Bill Bron Bafflestone. See you next time.